I wrote the word spare next to her name on the intake board at 0610 on a Monday morning, and I have thought about that word every day since, not because it was cruel. I have written worse things on intake boards. I wrote it because Sergeant Major Holt used it at roll call, and I did not correct him. And when you run a course for 14 years, you stop thinking hard about the words that come easy. You write what the senior man says. You move on. I moved on. Her name was Carr, Warrant Officer CW2. Her unit had an open certification slot and she filled it. That was the whole explanation Holt gave me, Tuesday of the week before, over the phone. Fill her body, he said. You'll have her for the week. Don't build your roster around her. I wrote spare, and I moved on. She arrived before the other candidates. I know that now because the duty log shows her sign in at 0541, which is 19 minutes before the next earliest name. I did not see her come in. When I walked the mat floor at 0600, she was already seated on the far bench, with her kit bag between her feet and her hands rested on her knees, and she was looking at the intake board. She was reading the word I had written. She did not say anything about it. She sat with it the way you sit with weather. Roll call was at 0615. Holt ran it himself that morning because he had a NATO panel visiting, and he wanted to be seen managing the intake. 38 candidates in 2 lines, joint inter-service, the usual mix. SEALs, Marine Raiders, Army SF attached, 2 British SAS on exchange, a pair of French Guin who kept their own counsel. Good men. Hard men. The kind of men who have opinions about who belongs in a room. Holt read the roster. When he reached her name, he paused a half beat, the way a man pauses when he is about to make a point he has already rehearsed. Carr, he said, Warrant Officer. She's here filling a slot her unit left open. He looked up from the clipboard. She'll run the trial with the group. Try not to let her slow you down. 38 men did not laugh, but 38 men heard it, and some of them smiled, and that is the same thing. I was standing at the course table 8 feet behind Holt, and I did not say a word. I looked at my own clipboard. She was in the second row. I watched her from the corner of my eye. She looked at the back of Holt's head with an expression I can only describe as patient, not angry, not performing patience, just genuinely waiting for him to finish so the work could begin. The Joint Combatives Certification Trial runs 3 days. Day 1 is ground fighting, takedowns, control positions, submission sequences under a resisting partner. Day 2 is blade work and stress fire, a draw and engage sequence on a timed course. Then 3 stress fire stations at escalating distance after a 2-minute max effort sprint. Day 3 is the open mat bout, 1 candidate against the course's standing champion, full contact, protective gear only, no weight classes. The champion that cycle was Petty Officer First Class Aaron Wren, 6'2", 220 pounds, 3 consecutive certification cycles without a tap. The kind of man other candidates watched when they thought he wasn't looking. Day 1, ground fighting. She drew a Marine Raider named Goss as her first partner. Goss had 40 pounds on her and he knew it, and he was not unkind about it. He simply used it the way any trained man would. She let him establish position twice, felt what he was doing, and on the 3rd exchange she went underneath his base, found the angle, and put him on his back in a transition that took less than 4 seconds. Goss came up blinking. He looked at her. She was already setting her feet for the next rep. I was just watching from the mat edge, and I made a note on my clipboard, and then I looked at the note and crossed it out. I did not want to be the kind of man who makes notes about things he should have already known. She ran 6 more exchanges that session. She won 5. The one she lost because her partner was an SAS sergeant with 20 years in, and she was trying something with his base angle that almost worked and would have worked on a smaller man. After the session, the SAS sergeant found me at the course table. "Who is she?" he said. I told him what I knew, which was her name and her unit and the open slot. He nodded as if that explained something and walked away. Day 2, blade work and stress fire. The blade sequence is not glamorous. It is a timed draw and clearance drill on a dummy target, then a retention sequence against a resisting partner with a rubber training blade. The point is not the blade. The point is what happens to a person's hands when their heart rate is at 170 and they need to perform a fine motor sequence correctly. Most candidates pass. Some candidates pass badly, with the kind of technique that would get them killed by someone who was truly trying. She passed cleanly. Not the fastest time of the day that went to one of the SF men, but clean in the way that indicates she was not at her ceiling. The stress fire stations were different. After the 2-minute sprint, the candidates came to the first station at a heart rate that made most of them breathe through their mouths and grip the weapon too hard. She came to the first station breathing through her nose. I noted that. I didn't cross it out this time. Station 1, 3 targets, 7 yards, double tap cadence. She put 6 rounds in a group I could cover with my palm. Station 2, 5 targets, 15 yards, failure drill sequence. 4 of the 5 were clean. The 5th was half an inch outside the scoring ring on the final round. She cycled the bolt, looked at the target, and moved to Station 3 without expression. Station 3, 2 targets, 31 yards, 1 round each, timed. The range went quiet for this one. 31 yards on a stress fire course after a sprint is not a common ask. Most candidates got 1 of 2. She put both rounds where they needed to go, set the weapon down on the bench, and stepped back. Petty Officer Wren was on the station beside her. I watched him watch her walk back to the staging area. He didn't say anything. He turned back to his own target and was quiet for the rest of the afternoon. That evening, I pulled her unit record from the certification packet her command had sent with her intake paperwork. The packet was thin. 4 pages, the standard pre-course submission. Name, rank, service record summary, unit endorsement. The summary listed 13 years of service. The deployment column had 6 theater entries. The certification column had entries I had not seen on a pre-course packet before. Hand-to-hand instruction qualified, multi-theater, combatives program lead, 2 separate commands, tactical marksmanship, advanced course, distinguished graduate. There was a classification tab on page 3 that I did not have the clearance to open. I set the packet down. I looked at the intake board across the room, where her name was written with the word spare next to it in my own handwriting. I did not erase it that night. I am not sure why. I think I wanted to sit with it for one more day. Day 3, the open mat bout. The format is simple. One candidate, selected by the group, faces the standing course champion. Full contact, protective gear. The bout ends on a tap, a referee stop, or 5 minutes, whichever comes first. In 4 years of running the course, I had seen 2 bouts go to time. The rest ended on taps, and most of those taps came inside 2 minutes. Wren had never gone past 90 seconds. The group selected her. I don't know exactly how that decision was made. There is no formal process. The candidates simply arrive at a name, but when I walked onto the mat floor at 0800 and looked at the staging bench, she was the one sitting in the candidate position with her hands taped, and her headgear set on the bench beside her. Wren was across the mat doing the same. He looked at her once, with a professional attention that was not contempt and was not dismissal. He was reading her. Holt was on the observer bench with the NATO panel. I took my position at the mat edge. The bout lasted 41 seconds. I have run through it many times since, and I can give you the sequence, but the sequence is not the point. The point is the quality of it. She did not fight him the way a smaller person fights a larger one, which is to survive and find openings. She fought him as if she had already decided where the opening was going to be, and was simply waiting for him to arrive there. He was good. He was very good. His base was correct, and his first exchange was clean, and he got position on her that most people would not have escaped. She escaped it in a direction he had not anticipated, found his shoulder, and took him to the mat in a transition that used his own forward pressure as the mechanism. Once he was down, it was over in seconds. He tapped with his palm flat on the mat, twice, which is a clean and honest tap, and she released immediately and stood up. The room did not make a sound. Wren sat up. He looked at the mat for a moment. Then he looked at her and he nodded, a single nod. The kind that means something specific between people who understand the work. She returned it. Sergeant Major Holt stood up from the observer bench. He walked across the mat, the full width of it, 20 feet, past the NATO panel, past the candidate line, and he stopped in front of her, and he came to attention, and he rendered a full formal salute. 4 counts, clean. She looked at him for a moment. Then she came to attention and returned it. 4 counts. She dropped it first, and did not hold the position a beat longer than necessary. Holt said, "I was wrong, warrant officer." She said, "Yes, Sergeant Major," and that was all she said. She walked to the debrief table, set her headgear down, and pulled out her course evaluation form and began to fill it in. She was the first candidate at the table. Some of the others were still standing on the mat, not moving yet. I walked to the intake board. I erased the word spare. I did not write anything in its place. There was nothing accurate enough to write. I found her classified record 6 weeks later, after I submitted a need-to-know request through the course command. It came back with a cover sheet that said the contents were restricted, and a summary paragraph I was permitted to read. The summary paragraph was 4 sentences. I am not going to repeat them here because I don't have the right. What I will say is that the classification tab on page 3 of her intake packet had been there for a reason, and the reason was the kind of reason that changes the scale of what you thought you were looking at. I have run this course for 14 years. I have processed 641 candidates through that mat. I have written a lot of words on a lot of intake boards, And I have been wrong about people before in the ordinary ways that people are wrong about each other, overestimating, underestimating, mistaking confidence for competence or silence for weakness. What I did to Warrant Officer Carr was not ordinary. I had a word handed to me by a senior man, and I wrote it down without thinking, and then I ran a 3-day trial and watched her dismantle every assumption in that word, station by station, and I still waited until the last possible moment to erase it. I erased it eventually, but she had already finished the course evaluation form and left the building by the time I did. That is the part I have not been able to square. She didn't need me to erase it. She had already moved on. She was at the debrief table, filling in the form before the echo of Holt's boots crossing. The mat had finished. I run roll call differently now. I don't use words from other men's mouths without thinking about what I'm writing down. It is a small correction. It does not balance the ledger, but it is the correction the intake board at 0620 on a Monday morning required, and it is 14 years late, and it is the least I can do.